With the war between the president and the special counsel heating up, we turn now to perhaps Donald Trump's most influential outside advisors. And they have a very harsh indictment of the media in their new book. Joining us now from Manchester is Corey Lewandowski, Trump's former campaign manager and advisor to Vice President Pence's PAC. And here in Washington, David Bossie, the president's former deputy campaign manager and a Fox News contributor. The book is Trump's Enemies: How the Deep State is Undermining the Presidency. Corey, CNN's Jeff Toobin, after the Michael Cohen plea and the Manafort business, said on air Donald Trump might not finish his term in office. Are the media, in pouncing on what Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort have done, depicting a kind of a prosecutorial noose tightening around the president's neck?
Howie, this is amazing. CNN does not have one on-air talent that could be considered a conservative. They have gone so far to the left that their only message now is to go after the president. What Michael Cohen has pled to was lying to Congress, which nobody told him to do but himself. You know, CNN ran wall-to-wall coverage about a meeting that Paul Manafort supposedly took with Julian Assange, which now we find out actually never happened. CNN, MSNBC, and the mainstream media has Trump derangement syndrome.
Well, we don't know for sure the Assange meeting didn't happen, but as we talked about earlier, I'm not sure the Guardian has proven his case. I know, Dave, you have very strong feelings about Michael Cohen's credibility, but isn't it also true that the president, who you admire, hired Michael Cohen and hired Paul Manafort and hired Michael Flynn and hired Rick Gates, all of whom have now pled guilty to lying and other crimes?
But the crimes, Howie, have nothing to do with the president.
I wasn't suggesting that.
No, I know that. But
yeah.
The CNNs and MSNBCs and the wall-to-wall Trump derangement syndrome reporters that cover Washington, that cover this president, want to jumble it all up and make the narrative to the American people that these all have something to do with the Russia collusion investigation. They do not. This president has nothing to do with Paul Manafort prior to his campaign. The same thing. Look, Michael Cohen pled guilty to wire fraud and bank fraud related to a taxi cab company in New York City.
That was
nothing
the first
to
case.
do, but nothing to do with the president. Paul Manafort, wire fraud and hiding money overseas and lying to the IRS over business deals, 10 years before the campaign.
I get that much of the cases don't involve Trump or the Trump organization, but Corey, in your book, you guys both sat for an interview with the president, and he said to you that fake news, which of course he's attacked, what he calls fake news, is the greatest enemy in this country. Greater than terrorists, greater than gang members? That going a little far?
Look, Howie, there is a cabal of the fake news. When I look at Jennifer Rubin of the Washington Post, who supposedly claims to be a conservative, which is such a farce, she's the last thing from a conservative. Bill Kristol, who is supposed to be a conservative, attacks this president because he doesn't like his delivery method.
Okay, I'm going to come back to that, but address the greatest enemy part, because that's a pretty serious charge.
Look, Howie, these people have all gotten together to attack this president for nothing. The fake news has stirred up the American people, and what this president has done is he's pointed out how fake their stories are. The media members don't want to report the news. They want to be the news. We've seen that with Jim Acosta, and there is never an apology. Jim Acosta went on TV and said that this caravan was never coming. They were going to be hundreds of miles away. Go ask the people on the border who have rocks thrown at them if the caravan is there. These guys are the fake news, and this president's done a good service by calling them out.
Dave, the president also told you guys it's hard to defend yourself, except on social media, of what is an overwhelmingly negative amount of coverage. He's the biggest bullhorn in the world, so it shouldn't be that hard for him to defend himself. And he does it every day, and he needs to do it. And what happens is this media narrative by the left-wing media in this country, this vast left-wing conspiracy that is out to destroy this president. They tried to defeat him during the campaign. They tried to delegitimize him during the transition, and now they're trying to run him out of town, through impeachment. It is going to be a very tough next 2 years because the American people, instead of being able to get things done for the American people, the president and the White House is going to be under siege by this left-wing Congress. Well, for the record, we haven't gotten to impeachment yet, if we ever do. But, Corey, let me read something that you and Bossie wrote on your own. The press trades on the emotions of their audience. The more they stir them up, the more they get them to buy their newspapers, tune into their channels, or click on their websites. And that's true. It's true on both the left and the right, in my view. But doesn't the president, like many other politicians, also play on the emotions of the voters? Why single the press out?
Because the press is in this to obviously make money, and what they want to do is the more salacious the story, the more the press talks about it. Look, Howie, you talked about it earlier on your show today, the Guardian story. It became the fodder for 24 or 48 hours about whether Paul Manafort ever went to London to do a meeting. Nobody did any homework on this. Nobody's been held accountable. Look, Paul's a very bad guy. He's going to spend a lot of time in jail for a lot of crimes that he committed that had nothing to do with the campaign, but somebody, media outlets should have verified this story before they just ran with the Guardian story, because they want clickbait, and that's what happens. So the president has to use his megaphone to push back on these fake stories, or else the American people think it's just true.
And by the way, this story is now days old. Nobody in the mainstream media, the garbage that they continue to put out there on this Julian Assange meeting.
It's hard to disprove a story.
No, Howie, London has incredible security cameras. The embassy where this meeting was supposed to happen, security cameras. The media stakes this place out all the time.
All right,
there would be one piece, one shred of evidence if this meeting actually happened, and not one person after nearly a week has been able to say that it happened.
All right, quick question for you, Dave, before we go to break, and then we'll continue. You guys write that the media are little more than the public relations arm of the Democrat Party.
That's right.
I get that there's bias. I get that there's unfairness. I get that there are stories that are wrong, but PR for the Democrats?
Yeah, Howie, the New York Times, the CNN, MSNBC, they are super PACs for the Democrat Party.
The New York Times broke the Hillary Clinton email story. That doesn't sound like a super PAC to me.
No. Howie, look, let's be real. They have to write stories, and they do write stories that are factually based. But if you look at the totality of their coverage, they have been so predominantly negative. 90% of the coverage in the New York Times, in the Washington Post, are negative. Those stories are negative, and that is what this president's been up against since the first day of his campaign.
More now with Corey Lewandowski and David Bossie on their new book, Trump's Enemies. And Corey, among those enemies, according to you, is the White House leakers, people around the president who dump out stuff, making him or their colleagues look bad. You guys write they get seduced by the press, inundated with calls. They're stars for the first time in their lives. Is that why the White House is such a leaky place?
Well, I think that's part of it. And look, these people who are nobodies before coming to the Trump administration all of a sudden get courted by the media, tell them that they want to have them on TV. They become stars, and all of a sudden they think that they're the show, and they're not. And look, what we've seen and what Bob Woodward's book pointed out was Rob Porter and Gary Cohn and others were literally taking documents off the president's desk. Those are enemies not just of the president, but of the American people, because they're stopping his agenda from going forward.
And Dave, you picking up the president's term, the fake news, you say the fake news refuses to report that the stock market is booming under Trump or about record low unemployment numbers. Now, leaving aside the recent downturn in the market, there's been plenty of coverage about the stock market going way up. I think what you're really arguing is that you don't think Donald Trump gets enough credit.
Certainly. You look at his list of accomplishments over the last 2 years of his presidency, it has been unbelievable, whether it's on economic policy, domestic policy, or foreign policy.
But you say refuses to report.
And that's
an overstatement?
Look, it's not an overstatement. This president does not get the credit that he deserves. The mainstream media's narrative is all about this fake Russia collusion story. They eat up column inches to sell newspapers and get clicks, and they don't talk about the good things that this president does on a daily basis for all Americans. When the economy goes up, that helps all Americans. When we're safer at home and abroad, that helps all Americans. And they play divisive politics every single day.
Corey, let me come back to something you alluded to in the earlier segment, and this is from your book. Turncoat Republicans and former Republicans have flooded our airwaves with hatred for President Trump. And you go through the list: Bill Kristol, jealous, angry, clownish political activists; Jennifer Rubin, you mentioned; George Will; Bret Stephens of the New York Times; Nicole Wallace desperately wants to be loved by the Trump-hating viewers at MSNBC. Why can you not just say that these are Republicans or ex-Republicans who completely disagree with Trump, as opposed to disparaging them in such harsh fashion?
Because they have such a hatred for this president that they can't see past that hatred. Look, these were supposed to be the individuals who wanted a conservative president to come here. And calling Jennifer Rubin a conservative columnist or blogger for the Washington Post is like calling Ana Navarro a conservative. It is such a scam. These people should be called out for what they are, which are hypocrites. Donald Trump has been the most conservative president since Ronald Reagan, or even before. When you look at the Nonpartisan Heritage Foundation, who said what he's been able to accomplish in the first 2 years, puts him on par ahead of Ronald Reagan. He should be praised by the conservatives. But Bill Kristol, Jennifer Rubin, all these guys, they're clowns, and they were supposed to be conservatives, but they're using their hatred of Donald Trump to further their own agenda and to have their own political philosophy put out front, which is they hate Trump.
But what they would say, David Bossie, is that they are sticking to their principles as conservatives, that Donald Trump has a very different view of conservatism.
Yeah.
And I'm just struck by the way in which, not that you name them, not that you disagree with them, not that you criticize them, but the way you just personally disparage them.
Yeah, we stand by every word. Look, these people, the Jennifer Rubins and the Bill, I've known Bill Kristol a long time. I respect
This is the guy
Bill.
who worked for Dan Quayle.
I looked at him as a mentor. But as a conservative myself, I am fundamentally I don't understand how you look at the Supreme Court, the federal judiciary, deregulation, tax cuts. You look at the policy agenda across the board of this president. If his name was Bill Smith, and the president talks about it in his interview with us that's in this book, if his name was Bill Smith, they would be fawning on him. But they hate Donald Trump, and they put their hatred above the ability for them to give him credit for even the smallest thing. They hate his style, and they can't get over that style to get to the politics or to the conservative agenda that he has been so successful in determining for the American people.
All right, next time maybe both of you will tell us what you really think. A good discussion. Dave Bossie, Corey Lewandowski, good to see you both.